We are all part of the creator economy. We're all creators. My name is Matt Abrahams, and I teach strategic communication at Stanford Graduate School of Business. Welcome to Think Fast, Talk Smart, the podcast. Today, I look forward to speaking with Angèle Christin. Angèle is an associate professor of communication and sociology at Stanford University, along with being a senior fellow at Stanford's Human-Centered AI Institute. Her work examines the social impact of algorithms and AI. She's the author of several books, with a new book coming out in fall of 2026. Well, welcome, Angèle. I am thrilled to learn from you today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Shall we get started?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Your research has looked at how metrics drive creators towards spectacle and drama. Can you share some insights and examples of how this drama driving, what it can teach us about the tension between authenticity and performance?
So for me, that's so interesting. Just taking a step back, when you think about media production historically, if you think of print newspapers, book writers, that kind of production, people didn't have any idea about what their audience really wanted, right? They didn't have metrics, they didn't have data, and they certainly didn't have the kind of fine-grained, granular data that creators have today. So now you have this kind of like wave of metrics coming at you, and you have a very clear sense of what people are really spending time on. And turns out when you're a creator and when you look at these kind of granular metrics, one thing that you realize very quickly, and again, there are exceptions, so I'm speaking in pretty broad strokes, right, is that viewers, listeners, followers typically spend more time engaged and are more likely to watch, and the content you create is more likely to go viral when there is either some drama, by which I kind of this term kind of refers to interpersonal kind of conflict or inflammatory kind of back and forth or kind of comments and response, typically with other creators. That's going to be great for you because you can also bring in the audience of the other creator, right? So that kind of conflict. Or kind of somewhat extreme content. Again, depends on what kind of content you post, but if you kind of push the boundary of what you do, so for example, let's say you're a nutrition influencer and you're going to start proposing or offering like very extreme diets, right, that are really kind of out there in terms of what you can consume, typically that's going to come with like more engagement, right, and higher metrics. So that's kind of the incentives. Now, the problem, though, is that perhaps as a creators, you don't always want to follow these incentives. And so we go back to the first part of your question, which is how do creators navigate this tension between, on the one hand, the pressure to create content that kind of is more drama heavy or more extreme, and on the other hand, what their audience originally really liked them for, which was their relatability, their authenticity, their very unique editorial line. And so that kind of back and forth between kind of drama and extreme content on the one hand and relatability and authenticity on the other is something that every single creator is struggling with. And you can think about it as a trade-off between the short term and the long term, right? So in the short term, if you kind of optimize for kind of metrics and you really push drama, conflict, inflammatory and extreme content, you're going to get spikes in the number of views and the kind of virality of your content. But then perhaps in the long term or the middle term, some of your loyal followers and subscribers are going to be like, I don't really recognize the person, the creator, the tone, the voice that I used to love. And so perhaps I'm not going to come back. And every single creator I talk to over the past 6 years experiences some version of the tension. But at the end of the day, they have to pay the bills, right? They have to pay the rent. And so many of them, whether they want it or not, end up at some point prioritizing drama or extreme content.
So the algorithm and the way in which the creators get rewarded financially and with followers, et cetera, is to be more dramatic, even though it pulls them away from their, in some cases, can pull them away from their authentic original purpose. Let's take a step back from creators, influencers, and let's just talk about professionals in general. I mean, having a social media presence is important. It's how we define to the broader world who we are, what we do. It could set us up for other positions, can provide other opportunities to us. Do you have advice and guidance on how just everyday professionals can navigate the pressure to build a credible online reputation while not falling victim to this drama or worse, the violating some rules that the social media companies have?
Yeah, this is such an important point. And actually, this is where kind of in my book, I kind of end, which is that really we're all content creators now. Not only obviously when doing a podcast, but just even not just as workers, as everyday human beings, we're just all kind of putting content out there and creating a public persona that then plays an increasingly important role in hiring, promotions, and of course, kind of getting laid off and fired for things that may or may not have caught the attention of your employers. So as kind of, the dynamics of social media creations really come for the rest of us, what are some of the key aspects that I think we can translate from influencers and content creators to kind of everyday kind of social media users? I think there are a couple. The first one is that you really have to build on your area of expertise. And that, is something that cannot be faked, which is that in order for your audience to trust you, you have to kind of come up with a kind of core competency, a core area, and a specific kind of angle on this core area that is specifically yours, right? Now, it may seem easy, but as anyone who's done kind of a bit of strategy or a bit of thinking kind of reflectively about what is my core area of expertise, it's really not an easy process. And I think that for a lot of people, as they negotiate kind of social media presence, it's very much a back and forth, right? Between like, well, I thought it was this, but perhaps it's not. And kind of it's co-constructed with the audience in many ways. So I would say that's the first thing, kind of figuring out what's the area, what's the topic, what's the angles that you feel comfortable and an expert on, and really pushing that on social media. My second take is, again, that when it comes to drama and extreme content, these are extremely, extremely problematic things to engage in. When you look at content creators and having spent 6 years kind of talking with them and interviewing them, following them, and kind of seeing how they work, they over time develop a very thick skin for getting harassed, bullied, insulted on social media. And that's an extremely painful process for many of them. I will add, especially for women, people of color, LGBTQ+. I mean, any kind of marginalized identity, you're just much more likely to get severely harassed online. It comes with a lot of distress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear. And so I think that, for people who may not want to kind of go on that specific emotional journey of developing that extremely thick skin when it comes to kind of social media presence, my second recommendation is always be aware that anything you post online is likely to be seen by your coworkers, your employers, or future clients, customers, employers, etc. And just like trying to keep that in mind, especially when you're kind of on your phone, perhaps late at night, and being like, oh, I'm going to weigh in. I have an answer ready for this. And just thinking that social media is not only that anymore. I mean, increasingly, as we spend more and more time online, this is basically your professional window and your professional facade for potential employers.
I think that last point is really important, is how you show up on social media is how people see you. And you have to manage that and navigate through that very carefully. I like your suggestion to lean into your expertise and to be forewarned that when you put your thoughts and self out there, that there will be people who will comment on that. Now, that commenting can be hurtful, painful, and upsetting at times. You have a unique perspective, and you've mentioned this a couple times on how you do your research. You have a unique perspective on storytelling in that you conduct ethnographic research that results in people telling you their stories, and then you in turn tell them, you tell their stories to others. But you also look at how stories help build an online presence and creators and influencers. So you're looking at storytelling and using storytelling. So given your different perspectives on it, I'm curious, do you have any guidance on what goes into crafting a good story?
That is such a good question. So it depends really on what you mean by a good story, right? And what's the purpose of the story. And that's where I think I kind of distinguish between, at the end of the day, in academia, you are using stories, but it's always stories at the service of, in my case, I'm a sociologist by training, a broader kind of argument about how the social world functions, right? And so in my research, I really take these individual stories. I try to understand how people see the world. And then I kind of build on that to identify what are the structural forces that shaped how the specific constraints and difficulties that they encounter come into being. And so, in the case of social media influencers, for example, all social media creators see themselves as fearless entrepreneurs. The rhetoric of entrepreneurship is very strong for them, which makes a lot of sense. And often they come to social media creation because they're dissatisfied with 9-to-5 jobs, to put it bluntly, right? There is a strong dissatisfaction with kind of modern corporate employment as a way of making a living. What's interesting, though, and this connects to the story thing, is that, at the end of the day, yes, they're entrepreneurs in one sense, but really they work for social media platforms. Social media platforms are the one owning the means of distribution of their content. And that's something that a lot of creators kind of have a lot of trouble grappling with, right? And so in my case, I'm like, okay, so let's take these individual stories and then connect that to the broader patterns of who owns what and who is truly making money from what. When I think of how creators themselves tell stories, typically it's going to be stories that inspire, right? And so that's a different purpose, I think, in what's the role of a story. And again, there, like part of the dynamic is creating connection with the audience, right? By providing some sense of vulnerability, by sharing one's experience, by showing how you overcame difficulties, by showing that you're relatable, that you're authentic, that you're putting yourself out there, and then building on that experience to claim expertise, a specific type of expertise that can be called confessional in a way, right? Where you build on your own difficulties, your own kind of hard times to show how you overcame that and encourage your followers to do the same thing.
Well, it seems to me that from the academic sense, you're using stories as data that you can then extrapolate patterns and connections and rules and the stories that the people you study are using are stories about connection, about being vulnerable. At the end of the day, though, in both cases, there's a purpose behind the story. The story serves a purpose. The story does serve to connect, in some cases, academic ideas together, in other cases, audiences together. But you really need to understand your audience and the purpose. And then you need to be able to take that content and articulate it in a way that motivates the audience you're speaking to and elucidates what it is you're looking for.
I think a great way of putting this would be to say that stories really are bridges, but the question is like they're bridges from what to what? You know what I mean? Or bridges in which direction, kind of. And so that's,
yeah, exactly right. So stories serve as bridges to fulfill a purpose. Yeah. I have always been fascinated by ethnographic research. I've never done it myself. I've always been much more of a traditionalist in the research I do. But I really like the richness and the insight that ethnographies bring, and I've always appreciated that line of research. If you were to give somebody advice today who wanted to become a creator or wanted to enter into this economy, what would you advise? What would be the things that you would say you should consider and do?
I would say a couple of things. First, I would say that the reality of social media labor is much harder than what some of the curated images or curated accounts that leading social media celebrities provide. It's a hard job. It's a job where you're alone day after day, shooting and reshooting content, where your employer or your primary interlocutor is the algorithm of social media companies. And it's a hard boss. It's a hard boss to please, as many influencers can testify. It's changing all the time. The formats are changing all the time. The preferences of audiences are changing all the time. So you have to be extremely nimble. With that in mind, what would be my concrete recommendations? The first one is almost all creators have one primary platform, but the ones who do better typically work across platforms. And so trying to have different income streams so that you're not directly wedded and only wedded to one platform that could go under or could completely change its algorithms or, its content moderation guidelines, I think is a really important part of the game. So just spreading your kind of portfolio and your content across different platforms, including newsletters, blog posts, websites, just really trying to have as large a footprint as you can. So that would be my first thing. My second recommendation is that, again, it's complicated to only be dependent on platform payments because you are going to be incentivized to kind of engage in more drama or more extreme content. So that's, not great when it's the only way in which you make money. What works better in my experience is, again, people who have different revenue streams. So you do, yes, some platform payments, but also some sponsored content where you work with brands and you're kind of transparent and selective in the brands you work out with so that, it kind of matches the identity of your production. And again, you do that, but not too much either, because if you do too much sponsored content, then suddenly, you look like you're inauthentic and you're shilling for the brand.
This idea of expectation setting for yourself and the expectations of the work that's required. Not a week goes by where people don't come to me and say, hey, I'd love to start a podcast. What you do is so great. And then when I explain the amount of work and the detail and the issues, people are like, that sounds like a lot more than I was signing up for. And this idea of diversity of ways that you do your job and how you get paid. Because at the end of the day, for many people, the creator economy is the way they get their work done. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I appreciate it. Before I end, I like to ask everybody 3 questions. One I make up just for you, and the other 2 I've been asking for a long time. Are you up for that?
Yeah, for sure.
Excellent. So beyond all the work you do that we've discussed, you work for Stanford's Human-Centered AI Institute. What is one thing going on there that has you really excited?
Generative AI is everywhere. There is a lot of hype. There is also a lot of fear. There are many emotions surrounding generative AI and what it's going to mean for all of us in the coming years and decades. I am starting a new project on the emotions surrounding generative AI. The hopes, the fear, the hate, the disappointment, all the emotions, positive, negative, that are shaping how humans are interacting with AI. And Stanford's HAI Institute has been such an amazing place to kind of really have these kind of in-depth discussions with computer scientists, engineers, scientists, and kind of policy experts in trying to tease out what are some of the ramifications of these technological developments that are happening as we speak.
There's so much talk about the information that's part of these AI LLMs. Not a lot have I heard about the emotion piece. So I really look forward to that research that you're conducting. Question number 2. Who is a communicator that you admire and why?
I think Greta Thunberg. I am kind of in awe. Just because I think the question of global warming and sustainability is a really hard one to get for the news cycle and for the news media in general, just because there is no big event. You know what I mean? I mean, except when there is a heat wave, but otherwise it's just this long kind of unfolding process that's happening over kind of hundreds of years, right? So it's kind of really hard to kind of muster attention for it. And I think that's exactly what Thunberg has been doing in a variety of ways, but just really to kind of crystallize our kind of collective attention around kind of how pressing the question of global warming is. And so that's something that I find really impressive.
The ability to keep constant attention on an important issue when there isn't some big event. Absolutely. Final question. What are the first 3 ingredients that go into a successful communication recipe?
Storytelling, clear deliverables, and I will add, because at the end of the day, I am an academic, rigor, right? Being careful and thorough in how you link the different steps together and not kind of overstepping or making kind of, conclusions that, really do not make sense given the data you have.
I would expect nothing less from you, somebody who uses ethnography as a means to do the work you do. So story, making sure that that story is rigorous and the deliverables are clearly defined. Well, thank you for the insight and input you gave regarding creators. We are all creators in some way, shape, or form, and the issues that you bring up are important for all of us to think about in terms of how much we want to open ourselves up for. The tension between authenticity and the algorithms, really provocative and really informative. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.